Yeah, hey, welcome guys. Thank you for coming. It's really great to have you here. I think some of these speakers, we covered some topics really relevant to Cypherpunk, Lunarpunk, and Solarpunk yesterday. And like what we would love to cover in this panel is diving a bit deeper into these terms and these philosophies and how they all maybe fit together or don't. And how they might contribute to kind of the DEAC movement and the future of society. So maybe it's good to do a few quick intros to the panelists. If you each want to introduce yourselves quickly, starting with Alexis.
Hi, yes, I'm Alexis. I'm the CEO of NIM Technologies. I'm in the Bitcoin space for since 2013. Before that, I was in the open source movement, in the privacy world already, or interested as an individual in all of the crypto-anarchist and cypherpunk movement. And in Switzerland, I'm also a political activist. I used to be president of the Swiss Pirate Party, and if you are in Switzerland, you heard about an initiative called the Right to Digital Integrity that was voted in Geneva and in Neuchâtel, and now it's been signed. It will be voted in a year in Zurich, and it's about digital rights, and that's based on my work. I wrote a book about it. Did the Right to Digital Integrity a few years ago.
Amazing, thanks.
I think it's super hard to top that intro. Hi everyone, Una, co-initiator with Isla for Switzerland, deeply passionate about community, DAO, and professionally I'm actually a PhD at ETH Zurich, had a long career on architecture, engineering, and construction, so there's a lot of perspective, especially on smart housing and basically ubiquitous built environment and how we as individuals gonna live in this, basically we are as a moving antenna in our built environment and these futures, but at the same time we're also very much optimistic and want to build a village that fits everyone and this Solarpunk vision. So really looking forward to this discussion and everyone bringing a different perspective.
Cool. Hey everybody, I'm Vlad. I'm based out of Chicago. Currently run BD at a token fund named Cosmo Capital. I'm also part of the core team in Switzerland, and I help run the Ethereum Chicago community as well back home. My studies in school were in economics, so I lean very heavily towards, I have a bias towards solving macro issues through the lens of economics. So I'm super excited to bring that perspective to the discussion today.
Hey guys, I'm Veronica. I lead operations for Zuzlu.city, the software side of the Zuzlu movement. We're building community operating system of Ethereum ecosystem applications. And I'm on the core team for Switzerland. I think broadly in the Zuzlu movement, I've been involved with since the start. I've tried to represent interests from the rationalist movement or so. That was how I was introduced into Zuzlu, or where I was invited to the original experiment. And ever since, seeing lots of dynamics that you'd expect anytime humans come together, playing out within crypto space and the Zuzlu space, tribalism, etc. I've tried to push forward truth-seeking and critical thinking, perhaps. And so I'm very optimistic and excited about Switzerland and Zuzlu and all the things that we can build, but maybe I'm representing more the skeptical, darker Cypher side. So I put the hat on to try to represent that.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, and I also kind of came into the space in Ethereum as very much more on the Solarpunk side of things. How can we envision like the best possible outcomes and for society, and have been more and more as I got into the space, Cypher and Lunarpunk pilled in terms of what is needed on a rational level to get there to the ideal outcome. So maybe just before we dive deeper into other areas, for each of you, if you identify particularly with one or the other philosophy, it would be great to hear which of the philosophies you identify maybe most with and what they mean to you or what they're about for you. Yeah, feel free, whoever wants to start.
I'll start. I identify mostly with cypherpunk values. Cypherpunk for me, as I read it, it was a very individual approach. I want to be autonomous in the digital world, and I want to protect myself. And I use the tools. And what are the tools? The tools are cryptography, knowledge of the networks, self-hosting as much as I can. All these kind of like tools where I'm in command and I'm protected from any interference from the outside. That was the original movement, but obviously we are building a whole society and we are interacting all the time, and we have groups and organizations, and now we have actual economy, and this is where the Solarpunk which is rising, which I see more like a follow-up of the Cypherpunk movement. Which is looking at how a society can be organized, and how do we make businesses, and how do we make education, and how do we create things in an environment where these core cypherpunk values are still respected. It's what is interesting, what Solarpunk adds. Cypherpunk was in a very strong opposition with the old world. So and the Solarpunk comes into a kind of an agreement saying, well, the transparent dystopia does exist, it's there, and it will always be there, and there's like kind of a equilibrium or balance, and if this balance is broken, then it goes bad to one side or the other, but they always go back to the balance. And so the same tool can be used from both sides. For example, and this is maybe the realization for me of this balance between the two, is the Bitcoin chain itself, the first Bitcoin. Bitcoin was built by cypherpunks, and it has a lot of values, but it has been designed in a very transparent way. It's pseudonymous, so we don't know. You can create as many accounts you want. You don't know, but as soon as you are using it, it's purely very transparent. But the ethos behind was not that we wanted to have the individual being traced. We wanted the system to be transparent. So we will come into a future, hopefully, where the individuals will be anonymous, the interaction of the individuals will be private and anonymous, but the functioning of the system will be completely transparent. Right? And so this balance, that's going to make the society of tomorrow.
Thank you. Yeah, love that.
For me, it's a little bit of a trap question, Isla, because we discussed many times. I always feel like sometimes we're super Solarpunk, and sometimes we're like very Lunarpunk also. So I think I'm very much divided. I do think in a world that we're living in now, it's not. It might be don't have the luxury to be fully Solarpunk. I think Lunarpunk, it's a necessary mentality to walk the walk sometimes, and to be defensive. Like we talk a lot also about DAC, for example, defensive acceleration. How do we progress with also protect our own sovereignty? And this is it's getting just harder by the day, because all the technology that is progressing and the way that is, or the direction that it's going. So I would say, in short, I'm very much both, or all three.
Yeah, I feel, obviously pretty similarly there. I think it's hard for me to put myself into any one specific bucket with pretty much anything in life. But I will say, generally, broadly, I do believe in transparency as a goal at sort of like the base layer. One of the things that attracted me to Ethereum is the fact that, similarly to Bitcoin, it is an open and transparent system. You can obviously check all the on-chain records, and I think as a matter of coordination, I think transparency is the best way to just coordinate people to accomplish goals. That being said, a lot of what we've built here would not have happened without people who are very strongly cypherpunk or lunarpunk and believe very strongly about the sovereign individual and tools, anti-oppression tools. So I may just not be the person to build those tools, but I'm very much strongly supportive of people with very strong ideals.
Yeah, I already said in the introduction that maybe I'm lean more on the cypherpunk side of things. I think it's generally a trap to ever label yourself and then as something that presupposes beliefs, and it's better to look at questions at hand and then form your belief based off of the question at hand rather than saying I'm a cypherpunk and therefore XYZ. But I do think privacy is a fundamental right. I'm concerned about the direction that a lot of different countries are going, and I think that that's the most concerning problem of our time, and think that that's a huge motivation for my involvement, is making sure that we have alternatives before it's too late. And there are many people where it's already too late where they are, so I feel fortunate to be in a place where I can even try to even talk about these things, let alone try to help build private alternatives. But there's importance for building, and it all goes hand in hand, so it depends on what exactly we're discussing.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And for context, the way that we've thought about Switzerland and the thesis of Switzerland is kind of that there's a necessary balance to be found, or balance sometimes can be the wrong word as well. So I think Vitalik's talked about integration, where it's not always the attempt to have one and the other at the same time, but rather, as you say, Veronica, kind of on a specific question at the moment at hand, which is the right approach to take here to maybe allow for the other one to happen. And I think that that's really important. But I'd be curious, kind of on that note, do you feel that DIAC is inherently more aligned with one of the philosophies than another, or is it all three? Or yeah, I mean, what's your perspective on that? Feel free, anyone that has a thought there to jump in.
I mean, I'm obviously very aligned with DIAC. I mean, if you look at Vitalik, who sort of like came up with the DIAC manifesto, I think I'm very aligned with his values. I think DIAC fundamentally is just a counter to some of the centralization issues we see today, and going in that route of like a oppressive centralized regime. So obviously very aligned with that. I think what I would caution against is becoming too skeptical of everything, and everything that's being built in, we had this discussion yesterday on a panel about what happens when something becomes like a kind of transitions from like a open source, non-for-profit public good into more like of a corporatized model. And I fundamentally don't have a problem with it. I think where it becomes a problem is when these entities seek like monopolistic control over and to sort of like squeeze the advantage that they've built early as like a corporation, for-profit entity, into just like maintaining advantage. That's where I actually think like capitalism really gets distorted. And to go back to my economics perspective, I think the problem here is a wealth inequality problem, and we should really be talking about what we can do to deal with these things. I think it's like a very invisible enemy that we have today. There's some really great economists like Thomas Piketty and Gabe Zuckman who've done a lot of research on this stuff, and it's clear that we're in a moment of very high inequality that's affecting a lot of society's issues.
Yeah. Anyone?
I mean, I think Cypherpunk is defensive at its core too, and DIAC stands for, the D can stand for a few different things if you read the article, but usually, or I think people colloquially are calling it defensive accelerationism, and then he says democratic, differential, and decentralized. But the acceleration side of it, I don't know, it's a semantic question. I can't really...
Yeah, because like, I mean, someone's saying this yesterday, like, they hear defensive acceleration and they immediately think it's not acceleration, but it's actually slowing down or like stopping.
That's deceleration, though.
Yeah, exactly. And so
acceleration is you're accelerating in a nuanced way.
There is a fundamental feeling that people have when they hear defensive acceleration or DIAC that like they're opposing ideas. And I think, yeah, I probably feel like maybe people have the feeling about Cypherpunk, Lunarpunk, and Solarpunk as well. Like, how do you guys feel about that? Do you feel that there's any way of having a society that embodies all three, or even two of these, or are they really fundamentally opposing ideas?
No, they all come together. What is interesting is that in Switzerland, I'm known as a person who is building tech for or working in companies who build techs for now more than 15 years. And I've been working on digital rights, and at the same time, people label me as a Luddite. You know, like as I'm an anti-technology, which is crazy, and just because I want the technology to be in control of people. So right now, the main way of thinking in Switzerland and in the world is that it's a pure solarpunk vision of the society, which is not. People don't realize that, but they want technology to be to the benefit of the government and to build to have very efficient governments. There was an article in the NZZ who the guy was criticizing the right to digital integrity, which is giving more power to the individual, because it was going to slow down the possibility for the Zurich government to make an efficient and very cheap digital government. And so that should impose he sees this as a way to impose this to the people. So my view is that where the acceleration comes is that we have to develop all these technologies that currently are not being developed by the mainstream industry, let's say, because right now the needle is way too much on the full transparency, full solarpunk dystopia, and when we say accelerationists. For me, is working on cryptography, working on decentralized system, and working also on the concept of anonymity, which is really has a very bad name right now. People say, "Oh, you want to be anonymous? Only criminals are anonymous." It's not about just the privacy, because privacy, I think we had this discussion also. I think the fight for privacy, even though it's super important, the term is not very well accepted. But we have to reverse this. This is what I'm trying to do, to reverse this sentiment of saying, well, actually, being anonymous is actually a key thing in a democracy, in a society, and it's a positive thing. Yeah. Because if you're anonymous, you are actually a free person, and then you can actually vote and participate in society and do business and be maybe more powerful, more effective in bringing something to the society. So we have to turn this, that's a challenge actually, to turn this narrative in a positive way.
Yeah, I think Vitalik touched on that in his essay on pluralism as well. He touched on the yin and yang, and how even on the yin being the individual and the yang being the collective, and that you need both, but even within the collective, you need actually the individual right to, like the privacy, for example, to be able to create the collective and create the coordination that protects your individual rights on the other hand. So there's a really interesting interplay, I feel, there.
I also feel like on a philosophical perspective, beyond just solar lunar Cypherpunk, I think what I deeply recognize is that I think nowadays I feel like we need to walk away from binary thinking. Which is like thinking that we have to be in one side of things. And I think Diak is beautifully describing a seemingly contradicting, concept that some people couldn't grasp, but almost the contradicting way that you walk both ways, almost the right way, I feel like. Sometimes funnily, I think about this like in a very, I once like just had this, I don't know, daydreaming and thinking about like, commitment to marriage. It's very interesting from Asian culture, and it's a big topic in Switzerland or in Europe in general, people don't want to commit into a marriage. So like when people ask you like, are you committed? Would you say like, you're 50-50, like actually it's not 50-50. Never, the balance is never 50-50. I'm not 50 in and 50 out of a marriage. I'm like 100% committed. I'm 100% not committed in the way that I know I can walk away. I know I have the freedom to walk away, but when I'm committed, I'm 100% committed. So you're almost in a contradicting 200% state instead of like a 50-50, which is actually the correct mindset. And I think this also could borrow back into, like when we're talking about seemingly contradicting, solar Lunarpunk. I'm not 50-50 into solar Lunarpunk. I'm not trying to say, but like I'm actually 100% Solarpunk, 100% Lunarpunk in certain situations maybe. That's just it. a way to interpret it.
I love that. Anyone else got a strong opinion there, or otherwise, yeah? Yeah. Oh, okay. Otherwise, I think it's interesting, like when you look at Solar and Lunarpunk, Solar is very much on the optimist side, and Lunar and Cypherpunk are very much positioned as kind of the pessimistic, dark, everything needs to be closed and intransparent, and Solarpunk is open and transparent. Is there a way that those two aspects can work together? Or are they fundamentally opposed as well?
Transparency and privacy.
Yeah.
I guess ZK, right? That's how we can be transparent, but for privacy preserving, which Alexis.
Here, actually, we have to. On this part, we have to be very careful about what we start to call privacy washing. Basically, my view on when it comes to data, there are different in the world. There are different views on what data is. There is one region of the world where data is a commodity. You can use it and to make money. In another world, part of it's more the U.S. In another part of the world, data is considered as a public good. It's owned by it's part of the society, and the government is in charge of this data. It's more like the Chinese way of thinking. And in Europe, it's in between the two, but there is a tendency which comes out where data is part of the human being. It's part of yourself, right? It's an element of your body, and you have it cannot be taken away from you. What it comes down is to the autonomy of the person. And so right now, this thinking is not very. On the U.S. side and the Chinese side, so the data as commodity, data as public good, the whole system is based on collecting all the data by force. Like capturing all the data from your apps all the time. You're profiling you even without your consent, whatever. And if you start to be anonymous, you break this link. It's a matter to protect yourself. So, but the way we do now is by saying, oh, we should have privacy. So we invent things which are useless, like GDPR with cookie walls and things that are useless. But there is a tendency. So what now people are doing is they're saying, oh, we're going to use those. All those homomorphic encryption and ZK technologies, whatever, to actually continue harvesting data and doing all the bad calculation and profiling and everything on the data, but it's inside a ZK something or a homomorphic something, and so it's cool for privacy, right? So that's privacy washing we should not do, right? Because then at the end, the autonomy of yourself, you will still have an algorithm that will push things to you that you don't agree on. So what we have to be careful is even when we are building privacy tech, is for what reason are we building the privacy tech? And for me, the core is the emancipation of the individual. It has to serve the individual first, and then we will define what are the structures of the society that will handle these free individuals. But if you start building things for the system, then it will impose itself on the individuals, and then you won't have any choice.
Yeah, no, one thing occurred to me, like a realization I had while I was in Zoo, Georgia, which was organized by Veronica and her partner, was that potentially these two things, one is not more important than the other, but one does take considerably more effort than the other, and is much harder to get, let's say, social acceptance and scale. And it felt like the defensive side is that side. So if you want to build and scale privacy preserving tech, you need to actually put considerably more effort into that, and it's a lot harder to do. And that possibly because people do prefer to be optimistic and do prefer to be in the mindset of not worrying about things and not always in defensive mode, that they do tend to gravitate towards societies that fix things for them and they don't have to worry about it. I wonder if you have any comments, particularly Veronica, but maybe anyone else on that aspect.
Yeah, I mean, not just Or when you mentioned it, thinking of it just being a harder pill to swallow, the cypherpunk or the privacy side, I think just from like in an event organizer perspective, if you're trying to organize something, you can't market if you don't want to. It's marketing just is a much harder task if you're not going to say, like, we couldn't reveal our location, we couldn't share who was going to be there, we shared like little bits of information and try to attract the right people, but for generally an event or you're trying to organize something, people want to know a lot of this information that then makes it a security risk or a privacy risk. And so I guess like in the Zuzulu movement, where we had lots of decentralized events last year, and this is continuing, we can see from a very zoomed out perspective the results of different approaches. And so there's projects that have very traditional marketing methods, and at the same time, people that care or need privacy and security to go aren't going to those types of events because everyone knows who will be there, where they'll be. So yeah, I don't know if that's exactly what you were asking, but as we're all here in person in the real world, and there's been like cameras going around, and I don't remember signing anything, and I got confirmed that that's illegal in Switzerland for cameras, like, you know, and this is an Ethereum conference, and there's like some argument that everything began in a more cypherpunk way, and then even these things were published on the website, like there was like miscommunication without being asked. And so I think it's interesting to see in the Zuzulu and Ethereum event world where we talk very philosophically about maybe what ideals are, and then in practice everyone's on Telegram and everyone's using like these like various services, and then people post on social media constantly like videos and photos of all the people that are there, and aren't thinking twice. So I think generally it's a difficult interplay, but maybe we're ideally moving in the right direction.
I want to take maybe a lighter perspective on some of these movements, because there's an aesthetic element to all these things. So like, especially cypherpunk, like, what do you guys think of when you think of cypherpunk in terms of like movies and books? Like, anybody want to throw one of their favorite pieces of cypherpunk fiction out there? Ghost in the Shell, right? We got The Matrix, 1984, a lot of dystopian lit. I mean, I grew up on this stuff. I loved it. I was born in Romania. It was communist regime as I was born, and you know, we overthrew that regime. And so a lot of those like resistance, sort of like cautionary tales, are very much embedded in the way I think about things. But you know, the irony is, the most important part is that we have a culture, especially in Western society, to be able to write that sort of stuff, to tell those sort of cautionary tales, so we can think about them when we think about the future, which I think plays into DIAC a little bit, right? Just the sort of like that mindset. And so that's where I really align with the cypherpunk and Lunarpunk stuff. Like, I watch like Black Mirror and some of these things, and it's like, oh my God, this stuff could get really scary. But then when it actually comes out, it comes out with us having seen those stories, and we're keenly aware of the risks of these things. And so I think I'm generally optimistic in Solarpunk about us being able to manage in the long term, you know, things that are built with like transparency and openness in mind.
It's a nice segue, perhaps last question from my side before we maybe do some Q&A. If we do manage to successfully implement a DIAC society that integrates all of these philosophies into one, what does that world look like, and what needs to happen for us to get there?
I'll start with one comment. The first thing is that we will not be talking about DIAC, and we won't be talking about technical stuff, because it's something that has to be understood by the majority of the people, right? So it doesn't need in order to make social changes, strong social changes, you usually need about 20% of the people, right? And already the crypto, the whole crypto world, when we hear about you know, like Bitcoin and tokens and everything in the media, the reality is that we are at a level of 15%, 10 to 15% adoption in terms of like people having some crypto and being open to it, right? So and through this, there are some values of cypherpunk which which are there, decentralization and something. So we're not far away of these kind of changes, and you can see it in the debates. But in order to have long-lasting effect, we will have an exercise to do is to transform the concepts that we have and to use to put them into words that people actually understand and are understood in all the different cultural environments and social with the social realities of most of the people, which are not ours. And so that's one. The one job I did here in Switzerland was to people were. There is this concept in digital rights, which is called which has been invented in Germany some time ago, which is good. I think it's the right to. It's the digital self-determination right. I don't know if some people are familiar to this. It's called in Germany informationelle Selbstbestimmung. Is like a very complicated things. And basically, the judges invented this term, and they say now we are going to use this to protect the people. It has very kind of cypherpunk vibes behind. But the reality is that no one understands this. If you go into the street and you say this word to the people, do you have this right? People are like, I don't know. And then so what I did is I rephrased this with using existing terms. You have the right to life. It's a liberty, and inside the right to life, you have the right to integrity, physical integrity. And so I added, okay, let's add your digital integrity. And then suddenly, when it came to the votes, it was 95% yes vote in Geneva, 91% yes vote in Neuchâtel, and probably next year in Zurich it will be around 90% people are saying yes. Because they understand very well, oh yeah, I don't want to be harmed digitally, that's fine, so yeah, I have a right to digital integrity. The work there was a change of words, it's a work on the concept, but behind it's digital autonomy of the person, and it will allow me to claim for using privacy tools to protect myself. So we will have, long story short, this future society will not use the same terms that we are used to, that we are using now, but the concept will be embedded into like much more wider concept that people understand.
Is it time to throw in the Switzerland line?
Which one? Which one?
Like the perfect word is Switzerland. Like, no.
Well, at least we're gonna try.
Yeah, no, we're very bullish on Switzerland. Obviously, as the existing longest-standing direct democracy that's doing very well, balancing certain aspects of autonomy and progress. And this is all what me and Isla always go pitch about, and we had talked about it yesterday. Yeah, and then so I guess the DX world in the future has to be Switzerland, but somehow a bit more hardcore.
Accelerated Switzerland.
No,
maybe.
hardcore on both sides. Not
Okay.
only hardcore outside, hardcore,
Yeah.
a bit more hardcore on defense side too.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe some of you have seen Robin Hanson recently talking about futarchy and prediction markets, but there's a slide that I've seen him show multiple times when he's talking about the difficulty of it being adopted in like companies, is he gives it the analogy that it's like the autist in the C-suite. And so you have like all these CEOs sitting around, and then you have someone that just blurts out the truth and then gets like thrown out the window because nobody that's at like at an executive position level actually wants to hear like harsh realities. And so I guess when you asked that question, I thought of that slide and thinking of like what would be my ideal, or what I'm hoping we're building with Switzerland and or just in general where I would want to live and, you know, help grow, is a place that can be very techno-optimistic and then tries to, you know, make the world a better place, solve problems, take the tech that we have, accelerate it, advance it, do all these things, but accepts hard pills, or accepts the truth, or is constantly seeking truth, updating the map to match the territory, updating the mental models, and just ultimately it's a social environment that allows for problems to be discussed plainly, even when it's not comfortable to do so.
And I think, like, we're on that path. Like, we really are. And again, to the point of like Switzerland being a great model for the world, it's like, you know, direct democracy, a pretty strong separation of like centralized power and like individual freedoms. That's what attracted me to this project. That's why I'm here. So again, I think we're on the right path. I think the technology that we're building is enabling us to make this stuff easier. You know, like the tech is just in service of our ideals. So again, I guess that makes me a solar punk. Very optimistic, right? But I don't. I think my biggest fear is creating a very adversarial environment between people from these philosophies, because like then the world becomes a zero-sum game where it's like my win is your loss, and that's where sort of things break down, and we have bigger geopolitical tension. So, for us to sort of like be here having these discussions constructively is the best way to prevent any of that from happening.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Any questions that people have? Any thoughts or comments? Yeah. Go ahead.
Hello. Thanks a lot for your interventions. I would love to hear from you how we can turn the reactionary aspect of being Lunarpunk, Cypherpunk into more proactive approach, and so basically upholding more positivity, fun in being hacktivist, and so less dystopia, less paranoia, which I get at 100% why it is like that, but at the same time I feel a lot more powerful to make people understand and feel to embrace new approaches which are respecting the individual integrity, freedom, human rights, but with fun, positivity, in a joyful way, which is not a reaction to something that we don't like, and so we just attach emotionally and with our energy to something that we dislike, and we keep talking about that, and we keep arguing about that, rather taking action in the way that we feel it's our way and it's a better way, and so we can come together and do this again together. Because at the end I feel, and sorry, I end here, we are a lot of different niches and bubbles with the same mission, with the same kind of values, but at the end we use different tools, we have different languages, and so how can we come together and be positive in doing so?
Thank you very much. And you're right, because a lot of activists at the beginning were like really on the very defensive side, and being on the so what is happening right now, there's a shift, is, for example, in terms of business, and I'm part of this, now there is actually an industry being built to build privacy tech. Until now, until recently, privacy tech was done by people on the side. It was costing them. It was they did it by really it was an idea that they had and they wanted to push it. But now we're coming to a phase where privacy tools are so needed that investment is happening in the field, and you can build your privacy. You can build a project which is linked to those values, and still and it is seen by the society as bringing value. So people are ready to invest in there. So that is a shift that happens. So now you can have people who actually make a living out of these things, which you didn't have before. So I would say that's one positive way of doing things, and I think the other one is that it's getting easier to have impact. I think because the censorship is so big around the world, that common people are being they cannot do certain things depending on where they are. Maybe it's just watching porn or playing a game or doing something which maybe are obvious for you here, but they're being censored and not allowed in the country. And then you can give them a tool, and this tool is spreading through their network very, very rapidly, because the censorship is so big, and you can have a real impact. And as soon as you are giving someone a tool like like Signal or a good decentralized network, whatever, or a cryptocurrency, actually it really helps them to disconnect from the censorship and the state that they have, and it has much more impact than. So we are in this phase where there's the impact as an individual you can have is much bigger also.
Yeah, and I think fundamentally what you're asking is about maybe a coordination problem, and just to throw out a couple of examples of like tools that are helping with coordination. Obviously, Ethereum. I'm a big believer that a core blockchain like Ethereum and its like native token is a form of money. And, you know, when we're talking about issues with like reserve currencies, you know, sovereign currencies controlled by nation states, we think about the risks of like, okay, well, what happens if I'm censored? Like if the state takes an adversarial perspective view of me, and like, that's why we're gravitating towards like sort of like decentralized, like censorship resistant forms of money. So to me, that's like, okay, great. We're creating a global neutral currency that we can all coordinate on and build our businesses on top of and stuff. That's super cool. And then the other one I would say was going to solve a big coordination problem is AI, obviously done responsibly with defensive mindedness. But, you know, when we think about like just going to a different country and having language barriers, like that's solving problems for us. So I'm sure we'll get to a point where we'll be wearing devices where we talk to each other. We'll hear each other in our native languages because the translation will be so good and fast that it'll be like our voices in a different language. So that's going to be huge. And then, yeah, I mean, I can go on and on. There's so many examples.
I have a quick note also on that. I think how do we come together despite all this? I think exactly this conference on Web3 is like exactly the perfect example. We're so people from everywhere, but somehow we have a value that align, that all gathered us here and believe in blockchain as a tech. That's why people think that blockchain is not a tech anymore. It's almost a belief, because somehow a bunch of people come together and in this industry, and we somehow align in a different value that I feel like cannot identify anywhere else. And this movement, I think it's kind of a more cultural movement and go beyond, you know, already. That's why, you know, there's a network state. There's like people forming community, because we feel that there's community that we feel more aligned rather than what we bounded by normal geographical, you know, your neighbors. I think this is super true, and then this is happening, and that's why we're also pushing from the culture tech perspective, that the culture, let's say the value and everything people has to align and come together. And back to Zuzulu, like I remember talking to a friend, Abu, like he was like, he sits there in the middle of like a Zuzulu discussion and he sit back, he was just looking around, says like, you know what a bunch of wonderful weirdos like all around here, like random people, random crosses of life, super random, but like it's amazing. And I think these are the energy that we're feeling, that somehow just beyond a lot of traditional or like conservative value that we have from nation state. I think, yeah, like let's see where it goes. And
yeah, at the risk of shilling, like I do feel Zulu is that fun and coordination and working on serious things all at the same time, and that's what is quite special about it. We have most of the pop-up cities I've been to, there's been a lot of fun, there's been great parties, there's been good dinners, there's been so much enjoyment and silliness, but we're all at the same time over breakfast then discussing like all of these issues and some of the most serious and consequential things for our future society, and then we can go back to having fun and build fun things but also build serious things, and that kind of happens all at the same time. So I think that's part of why, and I mean, this may be a little bit hyperbole, but like I genuinely felt at the end of the first Zuzulu I went to that like this is the group of people with maybe the most potential in the world to really change the direction that we're going, and I still believe that. I think to some degree with the decentralization of Zuzulu, some of the momentum that I felt around that was lost, but like I'm starting to see it again now this year, and I hope that will continue.
I think that's a beautiful note to end. I just wanted to quickly shout out Rose, who couldn't be here today, which is why I ended up joining the panel. But she and her work with Darkfi Squad, I think they really are focusing on trying to make privacy seem fun. And I think she also studied like propaganda and marketing and et cetera. And so I think it's both been very intentional and in somewhat successful way to make the more meme side of privacy can be a cool thing. But ultimately, personally, I really agree with especially what you guys are saying about Zuzulu, because that was life-changing in that way of feeling like you're an anon or pseudonymous remote worker and just connecting with people maybe via subreddits or wherever, like you're finding the shared topics, and then suddenly Zuzulu brought like this opportunity of not just spending extended amount of time with people with co-living, but now building a permanent village where you're retracting these similar similar types of people that want to build something like this in the world. I'm using very vague language because there are so many different projects with different ideals, and obviously I've joined Switzerland team because I'm very bullish on not just the country but also the people that I've met that keep being attracted to this Switzerland movement. I feel quite optimistic about.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Is it? There you go.
Thank you very much. It's really inspiring. I have kind of two things I want to say, and they are kind of going in the same direction. So one is that I want to come out on the side of slowness, and I think people building mixed nets probably know the value of slowness sometimes. And the other one was like a bit of a, like, it's related to slowness, but like a meditative approach to kind of holding the full truth and the weight of the truth kind of present, and then finding some joy in that. So one suggestion was kind of to also not have just solar punks and kind of lunar punks and cypherpunks, but also solar monks and lunar monks and cypher monks. I really like the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxies, and I think it's actually a different book where he talks about the electronic monk, and yeah, so I really like that. So kind of, yeah, I think the world is very difficult, but sometimes with slowness and even taking a step back, you can get very far. Like there's some guy, like, I don't know, it's maybe almost 3,000 years ago, and he just sat down under a tree, and I think it still has big impact nowadays. So there's something to say about that. Maybe I'll leave it at that. There's much more to say, but I want others to be able to talk as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really love that, and I think from what I know of Vitalik, I get the impression he may be a solar monk in some ways.
Thank you for the insightful ideas. I have one question about how do you think of the crypto now as adopted or acquired by the governments and big corporates? Or maybe I say it in this way, like I feel crypto emerges as a way to at least want to reshaping the existing rules, but now, and also we want the mass adoption of this technology. And now you see the mass adoption is happening, but you also see that corporates or people who are already dominant or has the power in the world are taking control of this. For example, like you see President Trump launch the meme token, and you see how impactful that could be on the market. So yeah, this is about that. How do you see of this?
I think it's a bit of a red flag, and I think a lot about the 1920s. In the 1930s, we went from a period of just like roaring financial, insanity and euphoria, gold adoption, to basically like, wait a second, we're debasing the primary coordination method we have for society, which is just in the US dollar. So what happened? They banned it. So I think it's always like a meme to say like, oh, when is Bitcoin getting banned? But that's like a real concern. Like, because if this is being done by essentially like wealthy people and corporations to store their value against currency debasement, that doesn't solve anything in the long run. It just exasperates wealth inequality. And so you get a populist movement against that eventually. So I think the current state of the way we're doing these reserves, I'm skeptical.
Yeah, I have the impression, in very similar emotional reaction. I did think about it though, and maybe we can be grateful to him in some ways for that action, because I think it draws very, very stark attention to the fact that these things can be manipulated for political gain, and that they're dangerous tools in exactly those kinds of hands.
Yeah, I was about to say the tools. I mean, I think we have to understand like the basis of cryptography, and most of the thing is based on cryptography. The basis of cryptography is that the tool only works if your enemy is using the same tool, right? So the cryptography is good. You are safe with using one kind of cryptographic algorithm because you know the enemy is also using it. Because so the case here is you have something similar. We are building tech, and obviously all the perceived enemies of the philosophy will be using those tech, but for their own purpose, right? So and that means those technology are effective, That's what it means, right? Otherwise, he wouldn't be using these technologies. So, but what they are doing is they're using it for the wrong reason, or the wrong reason we believe. So our job now is to develop the right philosophies so that they are becoming widespread, so people can understand that using this technology with this mindset is going to bring them much more than using it with the kind of mindset or just like raise money or for fun or whatever. So so technology comes with some philosophy and some political work that needs to be done. But of course, it always later, and the enemies are always taking this technology first. That's my answer.
Thank you very much. I think we're at time, so we'll leave it there. But yeah, I definitely love the where we were going with this. It reminds me of a quote that I heard once, which was, "One ought less to learn than to contemplate." So back to the meditative thing. I know I'm very much into learning, but it brings me back to also to the mind defense topics and the cognitive sovereignty that we talk a lot about. Definitely, there is a risk of, if we don't think about these things ourselves and we just take what's given to us and what is popular and what is winning in the attention economy, then we may not get the Solarpunk outcomes that we all desire. So yeah, thank you everyone for coming. And
really big applause to our panelists. Thank you very much. I love the insights you shared, especially on the community side. Yeah, the discussion can go forward for the next hour or so, but unfortunately or fortunately, we still have few sessions this afternoon. So the next session will be starting in 3 minutes.